Good morning, students. Students, as we know that we are going through Chapter 5 from the Snapshots, and the title of the chapter is Mother's Day. Children, this chapter is written by J.V. Priestley, and uh, in this chapter, the author tells us about Mrs. Pearson. Mrs. Pearson is the main character of this chapter, one act play, and all the other members of her family are George Pearson, her husband, Doris, her daughter, Cyril, her son. And now uh, we have already read that Mrs. Pearson is in the form and personality of Mrs. Fitzgerald. Because uh, Mrs. Fitzgerald knows some magical tricks to exchange the personalities. And we have read she has done so because of mending the bad habits of all the members of her family. Okay, students? So we see that when Mrs. Pearson is talking to her son Cyril, in the meantime, Mrs. Fitzgerald comes, and when Mrs. Fitzgerald comes, she just asks Mrs. Pearson what is going on. All the things are going on quite smoothly in the family. देखिए जब चेंज पर्सनालिटी में मिसेस पियर्सन के पास मिसेस फिट्जराल्ड आती है, पूछती है सब कुछ ठीक ठाक चल रहा है, तो वो उसे मीन्स राइटली आंसर देती है कि ऑल द थिंग्स आर क्वाइट नॉर्मल. तो इन द मीन टाइम when Mrs. Pearson talks to Mrs. Fitzgerald, in the meantime, Cyril stalks off into the kitchen, goes towards the kitchen. And students, today we are going to start from page number 47. Okay? This is the speech of Mrs. Fitzgerald, moving to the settee, whispering. Moving towards the settee or bench or sofa, whispering or speaking slowly. Oh dear, what is happening? अब देखिए मिसेस फिट्जराल्ड सेटी की ओर जाती हुई, whispering करती हुई कहती है, oh dear, what is happening in the family? परिवार में क्या चल रहा है? तो मिसेस पियर्सन at once answers quite calmly, nothing much. Just putting them in their places. That's all. Doing what you ought to have done long since. Well, nothing is going on, and I'm just putting them in their places. कहती कुछ भी नहीं चल रहा है. कामली बड़े शांतिपूर्वक कहती है केवल मैं इन लोगों को इनकी जगह दिखा रही हूँ. I am just showing all the members of the family their own places. If the daughter is there, she should behave like the daughter. If the son is there, he should behave like the son. Or if the husband is there, so he should behave like the husband. So Mrs. Fitzgerald says, is George home? George is there at home? She sits beside Mrs. Pearson on the settee, and now she sits just near Mrs. Pearson on the settee. To Mrs. Pearson, yes, I have been telling him what they think of him at the club. Oh, Mrs. Pearson says to Mrs. Fitzgerald that George Pearson is there at home, and she has been telling him what the people of his club think about him. They laugh at him. They call him by some other name, Pompey Pearson. तो कहती है कि मैं अपने हस्बैंड जॉर्ज को बता रही हूँ कि जो क्लब के लोग हैं वो उसके लिए क्या सोचते हैं. ओके स्टूडेंट्स, तो मिसेस फिट्जरल्ड, वेल, they think a lot of him, don't they? Mrs. Pearson, no, they don't, and now he knows it. Mrs. Fitzgerald, at this time quite nervously, oh dear, I wish you hadn't. Mrs. Fitzgerald, अब देखिए मिसेस फिट्जरल्ड नर्वस होते हुए कहती है कि मुझे ये बताते हुए तुम्हें आश्चर्य है कि आई विश यू हैडंट मिसेस फिट्जरल्ड. आई विश दैट यू हैडंट मिसेस फिट्जरल्ड. तो मिसेस पियर्सन, नॉनसेंस, डूइंग देम all a word of good, and they will be eating out of your hand soon. You will see. So Mrs. Pearson is now somewhat a strict and hard lady, and she says that all the members in the family should know their own places, and they should not depend on others. And they should not behave in such a way. To Mrs. Fitzgerald, I don't think I want them eating out of my hand. Mrs. Pearson impatiently, well, whatever you want, they will be doing it. अब देखिए जब वो कहती है मिसेस पियर्सन कहती है क्या मूर्खता की बात करती हो, सभी को लाभ हो रहा है फैमिली में, अब भी जल्दी तुम्हारे हाथ से खाना खाएंगे, तुम्हारे इशारे पर चलेंगे, तुम देखो. तो मिसेस फिट्जरल्ड कहती है मैं नहीं चाहती कि वो मेरे हाथ से खाना खाएं, मेरे इशारे पर चलें. तो मिसेस पियर्सन फिर मीन्स इम्पेशेंटली, अधीरतापूर्वक कहती है वेल वॉट एवर यू वांट दे विल बी डूइंग. आप जो कुछ भी चाहेंगे ऑल द मेंबर्स ऑफ द फैमिली विल बी डूइंग सो. All three of them, mark my words, Mrs. Pearson, all three of them will do the same. तीनों ही जो सदस्य हैं वो ठीक वही काम करेंगे जो आप चाहेंगे. जॉर्ज एंटर्स लेफ्ट ग्लमली. अब देखिए इन द मीन टाइम जॉर्ज पियर्सन एंटर्स फ्रॉम द लेफ्ट साइड एंड ही लुक्स quite glumly, sad, disappointed. He is unpleasantly surprised when he sees the visitor. अब देखिए जॉर्ज उदास मन से अंदर आता है और वो नए विजिटर को देखकर, जो वहाँ पर विजिटर मिसेस फिट्जरल्ड हैं, उन्हें देखकर थोड़ा हैरान हो जाता है. He moves to the armchair left, sits down heavily and glumly, lights his pipe, and he sits on the armchair and lights his pipe. आर्मचेयर पर बैठ जाता है, अपने पाइप को लाइट अप करता है. Then he looks from Mrs. Pearson to Mrs. Fitzgerald. Then he looks from Mrs. Pearson to Mrs. Fitzgerald. फिर मिसेस पियर्सन से मिसेस फिट्जरल्ड की ओर देखता है, हु इज रिगार्डिंग हिम एनेक्ससली. तो जॉर्ज सेज जस्ट लुक्ड इन फॉर ए मिनट, आई सपोज मिसेस फिट्जरल्ड. मिसेस फिट्जरल्ड शायद 1 मिनट के लिए आप मिलने आई हो. Just looked in for a minute, I suppose so, Mrs. Fitzgerald. So Mrs. Fitzgerald says, who didn't know what she is saying? Well, yes, I suppose so, George. So Mrs. Fitzgerald also means follows whatever the things said by George Pearson to her. George, aghast, becomes at once amazed and surprised. George, you are calling me by the name George? So Mrs. Fitzgerald nervously, oh, I am sorry. Really, I am sorry. I should not call you by your name. So now Mrs. Pearson quite impatiently, what does it matter? It doesn't matter at all. And if Mrs. Fitzgerald is calling you by the name, it doesn't matter at all. तो मिसेस पियर्सन कहती हैं कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है. What does it matter? It doesn't matter at all. Your name's George, isn't it? बोले आपका नाम जॉर्ज है, जॉर्ज पियर्सन क्या नहीं है? Who would you think you are? Duke of Edinburgh? तुम क्या सोचते हो तुम कौन हो? Duke of Edinburgh? एडिनबर्ग के ड्यूक हो? Are you the ruler of Edinburgh? You are not George? So George says angrily. Now when George listens to the words of Mrs. Pearson, he at once tells her quite angrily. अब देखिए जॉर्ज नाराज हो जाता है कि what has he got to do with it? Just tell me that. And isn't it bad enough without her calling me George? अब देखिए जॉर्ज becomes angry and tells Mrs. Pearson that really it is bad that Mrs. Fitzgerald is calling him by his name, George. Naughty, Pompey Pearson. बोले कि ये बेहतर है कि मिसेस फिट्जराल्ड मुझे जॉर्ज कहकर पुकारें. And you have not yet prepared tea, and you were also calling me Pompey Pearson. And poor Doris has been crying her eyes out upstairs. Yes, crying her eyes out. And you have also scolded Doris, and she has been crying out. और कहता है कि तुमने डॉरिस को भी डांटा है और वो रो रही है. And she is crying her eyes out. Okay, students. So that's all in this lecture. We shall go through the next lecture in the next video. Thank you.